I'm finally getting around to putting together the video that I have done for testing for range. Okay, so these are the devices that were used: ESP32 minis, the D1 minis, and ESP32Us with the extended or additional external antennas. Also on these devices are the LoRa modules to be able to show for the testing on how we can get our range for the LoRa modules. I'm going to be testing 2 different modes for each of the different settings. Okay, so ESPNOW has a standard distance range, which I'll be testing on these devices for standard as well as LR or long range mode. We're going to verify and see what kind of range we can get in actual play settings for using these devices in an actual setup application, which I'll go over shortly. Then I'll be using the Wi-Fi or the ESP32U devices to test out these external antennas for using ESPNOW for both standard and long range. After I'm done with that, I will be doing the testing for the LoRa modules built onto my Jedge controllers to verify and see what kind of range I can get on both the standard as well as the long range modes for the LoRa transmission settings. So there's 2 different settings, and I'll show you kind of the differences on those on the computer for the code that I'm using for this. And we're going to just verify and see what kind of range we can get in a place that I commonly use for playing laser tag. It's basically a big open space, and I'll go through that momentarily. So I'm here at the Choyas Lake Park Recreation Area in El Cajon area of San Diego. I think the city of San Diego, but regardless. So the test we're going to be doing is out here at the recreation area in the trails area on the side of the park along the lake. And so we're going to be testing the ESPNOW and the LoRa RYL R896 devices. The LoRa modules are spec'd out to be up to a range of 15 kilometers and typical about 4 kilometers is what the specs say. So we'll see what we get. And obviously we have some trees, some brush, and things like that for our obstructions. Most of the tests people do for range on ESPNOW or LoRa is always with areas where there's clear line of sight. I don't really care about line of sight. What I want is functional. So the use application that I have for this stuff is I use the communications for device-to-device communication between laser tag guns and laser tag host controllers and bases. And so what I'd like to see is realistic range that I would get for the location, the farthest distance what I would have, not from device to device for gun to gun, but the host controller to the gun. Because that can potentially be the longest range that I ever have on anything. And that's what I want to test out for this. All right, we're testing the ESP32 minis first. And this is a blinking LED on the board, which tells us we're in range and we're receiving transmission. Now we're just really close to the device though, it's only right there. And on my watch, I'm going to be verifying how many feet I'm able to walk away from this and still get an adequate data transmission. Oh. So now we've got spotty data reception at this point. Not always hitting. And we're at 243 feet. Okay, now we're going to be doing testing on the ESP32U. Now these don't have built-in LED indicators, just the power on light. And so we are going to have to put a buzzer on here that might be a little bit annoying. But we'll check our distance now for this one. We got spotty communication. It's a little spotty here, and we're at 251 feet. It's still... Okay, now we're doing the 32U ESP32U long range mode. See how we do on this one. Got spotty reception here. We're at 0.11 miles. All right, now the ESP32 Mini D1 under ESPNOW long range. Yep, we're losing transmissions. Yep, that's about it. We are 343 feet. Okay, about to go and do the testing for LoRa now. Finish the ESP32 ESPNOW protocols. So there's something to kind of explain a little bit in the difference in these protocols. Major difference is the range, obviously. I expect to see significant amount of range differences, but transmission speed. So if you looked at the videos from doing the ESP32 with the ESPNOW protocol, I was blinking the LED or the speaker every 2 seconds. Can't do that with LoRa because the data transmission speed is so slow. So ESPNOW can send data transmissions back and forth to each other with a round trip speed of about 3 milliseconds on standard ESPNOW and about 6 milliseconds on LR mode. So it's twice the time to send the data back and forth. And when I say back and forth, I'm saying the sender is sending a data packet to the receiver. The receiver receives it, processes it, and sends it back to the sender. So full round trip speed of 3 milliseconds on ESPNOW standard. So that's incredibly fast. You can send a lot of data really quickly. And then LR mode is about roughly 6 milliseconds. And obviously transmission speed may vary depending on the distance, but that's across the room, indoors. So LoRa transmissions for the first one I'm testing is about 3.5 seconds of transmission speed, round trip. So that means that the sender sends a data packet to the receiver receives it, sends it back, and it's received by the original sender in a full round trip of 3.5 seconds. So that's quite a bit of time lag. However, range is drastically increased, and we'll see how that goes. Okay, initiating testing for LoRa standard range or under the RYL 896 device. Now these will pulse every 5 seconds versus 2 seconds for the beeper now. 6, 7, 8, 1, 2, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 1, 2, 4, 5, 6, 8, 1, 2, 8, 1, 2, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 3, 4, 5, 7, 8, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 1, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 2, 3, 4. Oh, spotty. All right. 0.26 miles, and we got spotty communication. So we're gonna call it right there. Okay, for this test, the longest range I can set these modules to is now set, and so it's about a 12.7 second round trip communication process. All right, so we're about at the park's edge of really how far I can go. We're 0.61 miles from the start point and still getting reception. If you see, there's the eucalyptus little grove, and beyond that on the other side by the road is where the device is. So it's able to get through, you know, up in the air, over the trees, and over here. So yeah, we don't even play this far. We don't even play laser tag in this area. It's a little out of our range, but plenty of space. But I could do a quick count for how long the transmission takes to get back and forth from this location. So watch this for a second. So that's 20 seconds. So that's 10 minutes there, or 10 seconds there and 10 seconds back. That's the speed of the transmission for this. That concludes what we're doing for our testing today. Okay, so summary for how we did today. So we had 243 feet from our starting point walking down the trail. Now this isn't direct line in feet away from a location. I mean, it's not like a Google Maps direct straight line from where we started. It's on the trail, right? So that's how many feet I walked on the trail getting away from the unit. So it's not exact linear footage away from the thing. It's because it's not an open space. It's more a realistic situation and environment. And I didn't use any GPS to track the location. So 243 for the mini ESP32 under the standard ESPNOW protocol, and then we had 251 feet on the ESP32U under the standard protocol. Now, mind you, that information, that data was lower than you would have thought it would have been. I was able to still get some packets delivering, actually quite a few packets delivering beyond that, and I took it out a good maybe 300 feet or so, 340 feet, and was still getting adequate data packets to say that there's decent reception on it, even beyond the 251. But for my purposes and practicality usage standpoint, like I wouldn't trust it more than that, because I want to have and make sure I get the data packets arriving where they need to, and go have the two-way communication back and forth between devices. And so whenever as soon as I start seeing a data packet loss, I'm like, no, I'm done. And that's kind of my stop point. And that's why I did stop it at 251. But I did get quite decent accuracy beyond that, and depending on position and clearance and stuff, and what's around me and surrounding in the environment. So yeah, the 251 is a little bit of a skewed number. The other ones were pretty consistent beyond those points. I didn't get much reception otherwise. So 343 was the ESP32 Mini, ESPNOW with the long range protocol added in to the code to broadcast it with a little bit longer range. And then 581 feet for the ESPNOW on the ESP32U with that Molex antenna installed. That's pretty good. 581 feet is, I mean, honestly, that covered most of the play area that I commonly use in terms of like the longest distance away. So that was actually, pretty good. So 500 and, let me see what it was again. 581 feet. That's really good distance to be able to have some functionality for gameplay. And if you look at 581 feet as a radius from a location, if you had a base station set up where it's broadcasting and sending out data and communicating with devices in a 581 foot radius, you're covering acres on that, which is pretty good. Unfortunately, I don't use it that way. I use it from a point location infield, because I don't want to take the equipment in farther than I have to, because it's heavy and it's bulky. So that's kind of where I'm testing it this way. Now the LoRa, I was very surprised to see how well LoRa worked on the for the standard LoRa transmission for the lower speed. I had, let's see what that was again. 1,373 feet down the trail. In fact, I ran out of trail, ran out of park, and was walking up the road to finish the test until I lost transmissions. And what's really nice about that mode in that setting was the packet loss was none. I had no packet loss at all the entire time on that until I got to the point where I stopped it. So 1371 is incredible for distance on that. And I think I'm going to stick with that mode. Reason being is because while I got quite a good range on the LoRa, the very far range extension on it, I had 3,221 lineal feet. I ran out of park. In fact, I could have kept going, but I had packet loss, okay, the entire time. So I didn't show it on the video. It was just very cumbersome, and I was questioning whether or not the device was working right. It was failing, but I discovered that there was actually just packet loss occurring, and I wasn't getting communication every single time, back and forth every single time. So data would arrive to the destination and data would be sent back, but either or, one or the other, wasn't a complete cycle for to and from each device for a full round trip. And so the data was making that length no matter what, even from a good 40 yards away. That longest range setting I put on there had quite a bit of packet loss, and that's a little bit concerning. And when I say quite a bit, it was probably like one out of maybe 6 or 7. 1 out of 6 or 7 didn't make the full round trip, and that was pretty disappointing. At one point in time, it was about 1 out of 10, but sometimes it was 1 out of 3. On average, about 1 out of 7 packets didn't make the full round trip, and that was like I said again, the entire time. So that's a little bit concerning in terms of how that setup will work, and so that's why I'm a bit more comfortable with the standard and the higher speed transmission in the shorter range, because I think that's adequate for what I need.